Hey, what's up everybody? It's Carpo here with the 6,666 subscriber special. I actually, it was really funny. I looked at my channel just a minute ago. I'll show you. Here we go, if it hasn't changed. Yep. 6,666 subscribers. I thought that was kind of funny. No, I'm not going to go into a talk about numbers or anything like that. Definitely not going to get into that thing. You know, a couple of years ago I made a video, maybe a year and a half ago, about the number 33. And I made a couple about 72 and 666 and Solomon's Gold. And I've had some wild theories that, you know, of... anyway, we'll set that aside for another time. This particular video, I guess, really I was going to talk about arguing, and I was going to tell you how to win an argument every time. And but once I noticed the subscriber thing, it just kind of made me laugh, because I remember back when I had 666 subscribers and looked at it, it kind of laughed, you know, and then it got up to 719, and next thing you know, it's up to 6,500. It's really strange. But anyway, thanks to all my subs for watching and for giving a shit what I have to say, because I don't know why I care and why you care, but we do, and we learn from each other, which brings me to the point of my video here, which is how to win an argument every time. And it's very simple. Learn from it. Doesn't matter if you win the argument by being right or you win the argument by being wrong. You always win, as long as you walk away learning something from it. And so let's just break it down here for a minute. If you're arguing about something that you know is obviously not worth arguing about, something that you know to be factual and true, then you're probably not going to walk away from the argument gaining anything from it as far as new knowledge on the subject. However, you'll probably gain some insight on the person at the very least, or to people in general and why they believe and think the things that they do. Or very well, maybe at least that you'll get the argument from the other side. For example, when I argue with, let's say, a flat earther, and I tell them, no, the earth is round, and they say, no, it's flat. And I say, well, neither one of us have been out to space, traveled around, so all we can do is base our knowledge on what we've seen in history, the scientists, as well as, you know, historians and geologists and everything else. But sometimes we forget about the basic premise, which is that most things in this universe are spherical. So it becomes an argument that you could argue for a flat earth, or you could argue against it. Since I'm arguing with a flat earther, they'll present me with at the very least, their theories. So at least I can know where they stand on it. And I find this important, because that's the positivity that you gain. A lot of folks walk away from an argument thinking that, you know, feeling angry or upset. And in past years, I've kind of had this idea that I wanted to stop arguing with people, and every time I'd try it, it just didn't work. And, you know, my mom would tell me I'm argumentative, or that I always seem like I'm ready to pounce on any idea. And I am. Then I found myself even playing the devil's advocate, in the sense that I'll hear somebody arguing something with someone that I even agree with, and I'll go and argue the negative point, as if I'm someone who doesn't agree with them, just to hear their response compared to mine. I'm not, and I wouldn't say, no, this is fact. I just say, well, what if, you know? And then people get a misunderstanding about where you're coming from. But there are several different types of arguments, and I wrote down a few the other day, because I didn't want to get into the technical aspects of what an argument really is, because we all know. But I don't want an argument to be something that's considered negative, or something that this world could do without, or doesn't need. I'm going to take this shirt off, because whew, it's hot in here. It's nice and cool for a bit. Now it's all toasty. Alright, now I'm ready to go. So, if you want to go and break down into the actual categories of an argument, there are, say, two different main types of argument. There's a deductive argument and an inductive argument. The deductive means there's a guarantee of truth to be obtained. The inductive is a possibility of truth, or a probable truth. And then there's a little chart where the argument can be deductive or inductive, then it can be valid or invalid, and if it's inductive, it can be strong or weak. So I'm not going to try to get into that. All I'm going to do is keep it simple and lay out. When I came out here to do this, I wrote down, what do I see in an argument, and what different types of arguments do I see? not about subject matter, but rather the person and why they're presenting the argument. And I wanted to come up with the 3 most prominent reasons why people argue. So these are the ones I came up with. Arguments out of ignorance, out of arrogance, and out of authority. So for the ignorance, and I'm just going to read kind of the notes that I took. And ignorance means the lack of facts, or an improper education on the subject to make a proper assessment. So they could be arguing, thinking something's true, but they just don't have all the facts. So that's what ignorance is. It doesn't mean that you're dumb. It doesn't mean that you're slow. I'm ignorant on a lot of situations. I just don't know because I'm unaware. But the actual term ignorant, it implies that a person is choosing to ignore rather than just not being aware. Another reason for ignorance is lack of proper insight or wisdom. And this means that a person could have all the book smarts in the world, and they may have a very valid point, but if they don't understand what the needs of the people are, or what people really think, they may just have a one-sided argument that goes nowhere. Such as like an idealist that has an idea of how the world should be when most people don't agree. You're not going to change everybody's mind unless you can present facts. And so, another argument from ignorance is fear of other cultures, or xenophobia. This would be the argument that let's just turn the Middle East to glass, or let's just, ban all Muslims from this country, that kind of stuff. That's arguing from a fear of other things that may harm us or may damage us, I've seen this creep up with all the new technology as people, years back I even fell for it a little bit when people started talking about smart appliances and how your smart refrigerator and dishwasher are spying on you, and TVs are implanted with all these chips and they're monitoring everything we do. And I kind of panicked for a bit, and then I realized here's how I learned to deal with this. I just don't have any secrets, it was a very simple thing for me. I guess, if you really want to talk about something private, go out in the woods, but learning to accept it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just the world it is, but I had a little bit of paranoia because of a form of, it's just like xenophobia, which is why I'm mentioning this. It's not fear of other cultures, but it's rather fear of new technology or fear of new things. And there's a name for that too. Can't remember. The xenophobia is generally based on confirmation bias. So if somebody tells you that immigrants are taking your jobs, you're generally going to pay attention more to that than of all the ones that are putting food on your table, or cleaning the motel, or doing the various other menial jobs that many Americans don't want to do. And that's not an immigration argument at all. I'm just trying to make a point. We pick and choose. We cherry pick the aspects of it that suit our needs. I do it too. Can't deny it. And I try really hard not to, and that's why I do play the devil's advocate and go for the other side. The last argument from ignorance is one of my favorites. In the past it was true, so therefore it must still be. This is kind of the conservative mentality in this country, at least, that things have always been this way, so why change them? And honestly, if you don't see the wisdom in that, then you're missing the whole point. The conservative aspect in that regard is a valid way to think. If things are going well and they don't need to be changed, why stir things up? Anybody who's had any type of job knows when something's going right, just, keep it going. However, many people want to try new things because they think it might work better. And both sides are right. And this is where a major argument between political sides is. But when you say that something was true in the past, so it still is, that may be based on ignorance, because you're not aware of the new information that comes out, such as people who still talk about how marijuana causes tumors, or dried people create LSD, kills people, or he takes all the different all the different hype that people have put out there about products, things, ideas. There's been a lot of urban myths and legends that people are just still believe because they never learned any better. Alright, my second part here. Fun. Arguing from arrogance. And I think many people could share and shamefully admit that we all kind of do this once in a while. The first one, in arrogance, was too proud to admit your error. That's a very common thing. This is especially when you're arguing and you realize that maybe you were incorrect, but you're already in so deep that you wouldn't want to be revealed as someone who is a flip-flopper or change their mind. You don't want to let the other person win, but it's very important to do so. I'll tell you, all the times when somebody has called me out on something and I stop myself from arguing and say, you know what, you're right, that was kind of stupid of me, or that was incorrect, or whatnot. You don't know how many times people have said, I can't believe that you actually admitted you were wrong. And they're like, and then they open up and they're very, very cool and easygoing. Even people who have called me the most horrific names, you can catch them with honey. Just be sweet. I hate to say it, but being kind to people is a much easier way than resisting. I've tried both ways, but the arrogance gets in the way sometimes because you have too much pride, and the other person is obviously trying to show their pride, and you both want to be right. You both believe you're right. But second one here is too much faith in your own knowledge, and that one is also related to ignorance. Many people really think that they're super smart. Hey, I went to college for 4 years, so therefore I understand world politics and philosophy. It just doesn't work that way. And you see this regularly with people who are college grads who will say, oh, you probably just dropped out, and talking to people who can't spell right, or, and trying to use education as a superiority issue, as if that makes you better than them, and it doesn't. In fact, the smartest friends I have are the ones who, in my case, at least one of the smartest friends I have, my buddy Kevin, I think he dropped out in like 8th grade. He didn't even go to high school at all. And he can't spell very well. His handwriting is horrific. But the guy is so smart. Smarts have nothing to do with formal education. He knows how to read people. He knows manners, respect, integrity. He can get along with anybody. He's an amazing person, and he's very smart. So anyway, it's amazing how people think that an education makes you just dumb. No, it makes you uneducated in academics. That's all it makes you. So the last couple, fear of not knowing the self, or fear of not knowing, which is related to self-esteem. Now, if a person gets into a debate and then somebody brings up something that a person doesn't know much about, they can generally research it on Google and then come back and say, oh, no, you're wrong. I can quote something they've never even read before that they found on Google to try to sound right. But the fear of not knowing, let's say if you're in a face-to-face debate, a person will make things up or, try to sound like they're right, and it's easier to just admit you don't know. And the last couple, fallacies, like ad hominem attacks. This is constant in an argument. This is arguing from a little bit of arrogance and a little bit of ignorance. But ad hominem is when somebody basically, you get into an argument with somebody and you totally call their bullshit out, and their next comment to you is, yeah, well, you're just a pot-smoking hippie, liberal, what do you know? Something totally irrelevant. I've had it hundreds of times. And as soon as I get that ad hominem attack, I know that the person is not worth debating with. And it's an important thing to look out for. So, and groupthink is the last one, in arrogance. Because all the other conservatives believe it, or because all the other liberals believe it. I'm not a conservative or a liberal, or Christians believe it, or atheists believe it. I'm not a Christian or an atheist. I remain neutral in the middle because I know that if you lean too far in one direction, you become arrogant about it, because it's the only way you can hold your viewpoint. In other words, if your viewpoint comes into a lot of conflict with people in general, and they disagree with what you believe, then you have to ask yourself at least once in a while, is what I believe really valid, or is it useful? And so this is getting long, so I'll try to wrap this up. The final argument is arguing from authority, and this is what we should all strive for. This is what we should all work to have. It's the aspiration should be to just know what you're talking about, but it's not always so easy because the other two get mixed up. Authority, first one, is obviously knowing the facts. When you know the facts about a situation and you argue with someone and they don't know, it's very difficult to express that without sounding arrogant. So you get from authority into arrogance, because you know in your mind you're right, and so you might make the person sound stupid by saying, dude, it's so easy, it's simple, look it up, you know. But you got to remember that people aren't responsive to that. People don't respond to criticism if it's harsh and directed at them. And this goes back to ad hominem attacks. Try to remain neutral and say, hey, you may not be aware of this, but this is kind of what I found out. Oh, I will agree to disagree, you know. And then rather than the person walking away feeling vindicated or like they won, they walk away with a seed planted in their head that they can further research. And I'll tell you, a very small seed planted in somebody's head the right way, it can blossom for a lifetime. Just the idea of knowing the self or something. But you have to show a person that if you're telling them a certain way to be or a certain thing to think or what you think is true, you have to show them that you have the demeanor to show that that's helped you in your life. It's kind of like if somebody's screaming at you, you should become more spiritual by joining this group. Listen to this, it'll make you so happy. And then they're all cussing at other people and getting upset. No. It just doesn't work that way. Or the person's trying to sell you healthcare products and they look like shit and they're overweight, they don't take care of themselves and they're dirty, and you think, okay, you know, this is you kind of observe the person. This comes down to the three Aristotelian, I believe, facets of an argument, which is the ethos, pathos, and the logos. And these are totally separate from the ones I'm talking about. But ethos is a person's credibility. Who are they? Are they famous? Are they well known? Do they have authority on the subject? The pathos, which can be even more important, especially in politics, is the way you convey the message. That's where pathological comes from. Pathos, a pathological liar. Pathos is a way of convincing people, or tricking people, I guess convincing is a better word, into believing your side because you are really good with your words, and it has nothing to do with the actual you or the actual subject at hand. It's how you get people to believe it. And then the final one is the logos, and the logos is the subject at hand. And if any one of those three things is out of play, if the person doesn't have credibility, the argument falls apart. If the thing that you're arguing about is useless or doesn't matter, the argument falls apart. If the person doesn't know how to convey their message properly, the argument falls apart. And that's why they're so important. So, back to authority. Knowing the facts was the first one. Wisdom through experience to call on. And that's an important one. And I used to, it's hard to determine whether wisdom comes from age or through experience or both. And it is both, but I've met some very wise 20-year-olds, some very unwise 70, 80-year-olds. So I think that life experience and how much you've endured can play a huge role in that, because time really is relative, and your perspective on time can change if you are involved in some very intense moments in your life. A year could seem to last a lot longer if it's very intense, you're dealing with family issues, compared to the guy that spent 2 decades comfortable in his home, never had to really do anything. And so wisdom only comes from age if you're using the years that you have to grow. And that's the way I see it. Which means that you have to be constantly focused. It's like learning to build a house or be a carpenter. Every year you get a little better and learn new tricks, which makes it easier. So, and as far as the wisdom to call from experience for insight, knowledge is not always necessary. And that was a really key component that I almost left out. That you don't always have to know the actual truth, or you don't actually always have to know everything about a subject to derive a conclusion, if you know enough about other subjects to realize that that's bunk. For example, if somebody's trying to prove that their product works through quantum physics, and you say, but I know enough about quantum physics to know that word's thrown around and that means really nothing, how does it actually work? And then the person can't explain it. You can know well enough by knowing how things work in another aspect, whether or not the person's telling you the truth. Hard to explain, but I think you get what I mean. The last one, sense of self, to distinguish emotion from fact, from fallacy. And I think that that's pretty much self-explanatory. When you're in an argument, you have to know yourself and be observing yourself well enough to know that you are arguing your point because it's true, or if you're arguing your point because you feel uncomfortable, or if you're arguing your point completely irrelevant to the original point to try to sound right. to leave on a parting note, I would say that argument is very important. I think it's an awesome thing. It's what we have as humans, and a lot of folks would like to, they don't like to argue. They don't like to get into conflict, and I see it from a different point now. That argument not being a bad word, it was actually a very valuable thing for most philosophers to, conclude the truth. Otherwise, everyone just sits around patting each other on the back, saying, "Yeah, sure, sure," and sure. Everybody's free to believe what they want. But it doesn't mean that you have to agree with them. And it doesn't mean you have to hold back if you disagree with them. I would say that the only time when it's really necessary to speak up about what another person believes and to argue against it is when both people are either trying to grow or when one person and their belief system is harming others. So if what a person believes, does, or thinks is harming others, then arguing against that is kind of an obligation of all people. So I think I've covered all the bases. I like to argue, but I don't like to argue, if that makes sense. I like a good debate. I like to, where both people can talk about something and not walk away feeling offended. But if a person pokes and prods at me, I tend to poke and prod at them. And I've gotten much better over the years. I used to be really bad. If a person went and called me names, I'd go onto their channel and see what they're all about. So I know that people do that to my channel. If I call them on something on a video, they'll come to my channel, see that I have a bunch of videos about pot, and they'll say, "Oh, you're just a dumb hippie liberal philosopher, pot smoking acid. Why don't you go eat some more mushrooms?" I've had several people tell me that. You're just, a mushroom eater or whatever. It's like, I eat mushrooms like once a year or every other year. But it's everybody wants to poke at something about a person if they feel like they've been slighted or offended in a conversation or an argument. So try not to offend people if you want to make your point, or else you're just arguing from arrogance. And if you don't know what you're talking about, then shut your mouth and listen, because you're arguing from ignorance. And if you do know what you're talking about and you feel it's important, then speak up, because then you're arguing from authority, hopefully. But we're all a little in the dark.